Alright, and hello. I have updated the model that these drawings from 2023 were based upon to eliminate this family room expansion here. And that's what the foundation plan for this looked like in 2023, where we had this full foundation. This was all filled with gravel, etc., and then there was a framed portion of deck over here. And that was that plan as late as September of 2023. And then in April of 24, I took a look at rotating that for you, and I liked it, but I think this is a more pure approach. So I went back to this, and then when I started working with this model, I renamed it to a current date. So this is the model we're working with going forward. And recall that when we put this together in 2023, we were showing this wide door here, because this was a newly constructed wall here. And now though, if we put that same wide door, and this is your existing walls and door, your existing wall and door back there, and this is that 6-foot slider, and you can see these are the roofs apparently of the addition, proposed addition, and that doesn't center up on that peak, so that's one thing to consider. You can leave this wall just as it is. You really can, but I have shown it with a 12-foot door of whatever type. I'm showing this was probably an Anderson bifold or something like that, which gets you this really wide opening. But this bears some research, because if you do this with the new building, after we go back to this wall here, you can see that old door and old window. If you want to do this, you're going to have to cut that concrete wall down to the floor to allow for that to happen. Now possibly you could adjust it either way. From here to there, that needs cut out, and then an LVL put up in here. But leaving that aside, and that's something for you to consider. And when you look at these doors, now this is from Pella, and I'm showing this 4-panel door. As going forward, I showed a 4-panel sliding door that's not really available in that size, but this 3-panel sliding door is available in 12-foot 1. And the critical thing on these, whichever manufacturer you look at what their net clear opening is going to be. And that's what's shown down here for these various widths of doors. And you can put any of these doors in there, create the opening and put any of them in there. But you'll have to consider that when you select it. I don't show anything wider than 12 foot. So if you start getting into one of these 4 panels, then we'll have to increase that header size over that door. So that's just something to think about. And this is where we were, and then we got rid of those. Let's presume those get gone, those windows and doors, and then we're back to something like this once we slide that back, that 9'6" or whatever it is. We end up with something like this. And now there's a number of things to think about as you look through this. This was that first one, and I still had that down 2 steps to the deck. I still had you stepping down 2 risers here. And I didn't even look at another section. I took this look right away, and I started working with adjusting these stairs for the terrain down there once this is adjusted and pulled back. And I'll keep this short, but it's something that you might return to, because eventually I raise this deck up, those 2 risers, and this deck is almost level with what is all but level with your lower level, with your existing lower level. Because, and I'll try to explain this, but first of all, I adjusted these stairs to be according to that, more or less, that terrain that's existing down there, at least according to the best I could do. And so you end up something like that. I steepened it up a little bit, that slope, so we could just have those however many risers down that is. And so I finished fixing that up, where you went down from the landing, you went down 7 risers on this side and 5 on this side to get to more or less the existing grade. There have to be some rebuild, etc. But then I came over here, and this is this existing grade right here. Pretend this is just gravel, hard scrabble dirt. This is where that existing grade is over here. So we've got a problem. I mean, the obvious solution is just a retaining wall here. But I looked at this for a minute, because I didn't want to waste a whole bunch of time on it. Just the things that you're going to have to consider, or somebody's going to have to consider. I took a look at some photographs, got this adjusted even more close to what I think it is out there, because we're 49 of brick, and then we have a couple feet of concrete, and then we have this existing earth right there. And right now, when we were still stepping down 2 steps into that room, we had a height of about 12'9" here. But I don't see how this happens with all this earth in here, how that is taken care of. You can leave this as it is, but you would have to put a regular, some sort of retainage back here that would come up and hold that up. But, so we were down 17 from the lower level. We still had 8'3" columns at that point, and we come up the maximum we can, where we're just going to bring this up level, because that's the way I chose to try to address this issue right at the moment. Then you have an 11'4" room down from 12'9". But that's what I did, is brought that floor up level, no steps down, you just walk out. I mean, it's all covered, so you don't have any weather issues, but you just walk out of that room and you're on that deck, and it comes up like this. And even that, I mean, that's just a start to deal with what's happening over here. And our joists are going to be running this way. It's not going to be like that, but that's just a rough representation. So we've got to get this earth out of the way, if for no other reason than to attach a ledger to that concrete back there for the last ones. And these beams will probably have to run all the way to the wall as well. So that earth needs moved out 17 or 18 inches to allow for that to happen. And so then, if you forced it, and if all this earth was just going to stay there, you would have something like this. And I messed around with where to put the gutters, because we have to have our downspouts, because we have to have one on each side of this chimney with this cricket behind. And I put those on either side of this chimney, the downspouts for this side. From here you can kind of see this land, but this isn't really how it is. And so once I move the deck up, all this work down here seems kind of pointless. We're back to tall stairs again, and all I could think of to do is put some sort of, railroad ties or block wall or something to hold that earth back at that location. And it's really not too bad, because it slopes down this way as it is, and this is all rough representations. But that is what I did just to get moved forward to handle that. And a person will just have to use their imagination, the available products, and what you want to create, whether you want to be able to cut in this way from up here or not. One thing to consider, though, as that is put in and deepened, is to make sure that this footing here is still 32 below grade at that corner. But once that was in, then I returned to the problem of these stairs, which now become taller stairs. So now we return to these stairs again and readjust those to account for this. And I ended up with something like this, according to my best interpretation. Maybe that one even comes down another riser yet, to make this slope not so severe down to the shed door. But that is what I pretty much ended up with in terms of the structure itself, in terms of putting together various things. But there are definitely still some things to consider yet in this film over on this whole end over here, because this all changes when we don't have this projection of addition coming forward to take care of some of the stuff happening with this second level deck. So that's the next section, probably, is dealing with this area back here. So yeah, we have this because the deck used to be down 17 more inches, and this was all mostly behind the new addition. So that all had to be dealt with, and I'm just going to page through these pictures, try to explain a few things. This is looking toward that thing and its support structure, which was something like that. And it probably is tempting to bring this beam all the way against here like this, but this all looks pretty clunky in live action. I clad those 6x6s, and eventually, looking from over here, we had this sort of a situation. These are the different things that I took care of at this end from looking at that. First of all, one of the issues is there's no way to get in here without having the 17-inch drop here. So there's nothing here now. Let's assume a little concrete slab goes there, and then the deck runs back to there. We wall off the dangerous area with this section of railing. That's your existing gravel path there. Maybe that concrete is brought all the way up, presumably. Something like this. But this was just putting together this end of it enough that a person could kind of estimate what it's going to take to put it together. And this can be varied according to what your field conditions end up. Because this is all built on the location of this. When you get down to the floor plan, that is more or less how this corner of that railing needs to be called out, is where the corner of this building is, that shed is. But I did a few more things where I actually made these regular columns like these, except these finish at 5.5 and these are finished at closer to 7.5. And that's what I did at that end to take care of that. And this is that same progression through the floor plan look. And this thing here was just too big. So I pulled it back so that these columns are in line with this thing here, with this end wall of the bar. Try to make a little more sense. And then went down to the smaller columns, smaller everything. And that's what we ended up with, something like that, except then, because this was still questionable at this corner, I ended up just pulling that back some like this. And this was, you could put this column out here at the corner, which I believe is what I showed. Yeah, I show this column out here at the corner so that it just comes along naturally with this one rather than being offset back like this. And that is still, if I do that, that is still a good 33 or 34 inches between this brick and the finished column there. And down here it's closer to 39 inches. And I mean, you could probably move that another inch or so and get away with it. But that was what I did with that whole corner there. And you can see how it works. A little railing here, you go down one step, and you're into the storage shed. And then this just shows you this same area with some of these tables that we had worked with before and their sizes, etc. So there's still a lot of room over there. It's a little snug right here maybe, but there is room for various furniture over there. That arrived us at here, and obviously we're not coming down 2 risers at all anymore. And then I just had to calculate all these loads from this floor, from all the roof loads up on this floor, and then eventually everything that happens down here. But all of these roof loads are coming down just like this. And so I used these ones here, especially these heavy ones, to determine that's where my support beams were going to be. And all of these numbers here, the 1300 is the live load from the second floor, first floor, from the roof, etc. And these are from the floor loads. And these are the totals of each of these points of load. And then this adjusts, see, this is what you have to make a decision on. This adjusts those footings to account for that. And when we do it this way, where we have these big 6,700 pound loads, these footings are 30-inch diameters. The big ones are 30-inch diameters, and almost everything else is 18, and the little ones can be 16. But these two are 24s here. Now, in terms of the framing itself, we'll just leave this alone for a second. In terms of the framing itself down here, okay, if we do it this way, like this, you could use 2x6 here. My program passes 2x6s for joists, but and that's even with, I increased the loading on this from 40, the normal code required 40, to 50 pounds per square foot. and the 2x6s were passing, but narrowly at 50 pounds per square foot. So I've specified 2x8s as the joists going across this way. And these ones are 20 foot. There's some 18 footers. These are all 18s. So if that's not going to be, so if we're not going to be able to source those 18s and 20s, it'd be ideal if we can get, these are the main beams here, and they're almost all 2x12. Some of this was adjusted, I think, a little bit as I went forward. But except for that little one down here, I'm showing them all as 2x12s. You could probably get by with 2x10s here, but I'm just showing everything as 2x12s, and that's what it was required. And the joist said 2x8s. The joist can technically, I would have to recheck it, but if you wanted to go down to 2x6 on these joists, but it'd be a little bouncier, and this will, the money you put into this wood, presumably this is composite lumber here for the decking, and the stiffer that stays, the better. So I left it at 2x8s here, 2x12s here, and this sort of pier arrangement. Now, if you wanted to break this, instead of having only 3 spans across here, if you wanted to have 4 spans, and I don't show this, but if you did that, all of these 30-inch pieces can come down to 24s. Almost everything, all the big ones would be 24s then, but you would be adding an additional 3 or 4 holes through here as you break those into larger things. But if you do elect to drill, 5 holes down through here, through each of these, instead of 4, then these can probably go to 2x10s. Wouldn't surprise me if they could be 2x8s. So it's a question of what the contractor wants to do in terms of those big pier footings like these, or smaller ones. These ones down here, by the time you get down here, these are going to be coming out of the grade. If we want to run those 6x6s, and I would just run them up to the floor system and then run second ones on the first floor. I wouldn't try to use this big 16-foot to go all the way up, because it's probably going to be 5 foot out of the ground and then another 8 foot to the bottom of the beam, or another 7 foot. So 16-footer, you could do a single column all the way up. You can make a judgment on that as well, just on these ones here where it goes up and supports the roof. All of these, you can bring your pier up to grade and then attach 4x4 and come up from there, whatever you want to do in terms of that. But then these are just how it finished out, the finished photos of that pullback. And again, I'm not sure exactly what happens here. But here's a little, after this, a little walkthrough of this area here. And that's about it. Just we can get together and talk about some of that, what we want to do, whether we want to use those 30-inch piers or whether we want to take that down to 24-inch piers, pedestals. But that's it. This little film, I don't know if I'll comment during it, but that's all for now.